Hey all. In this assignment, we're going to go ahead and explore how we can bolt on a laser gun to our ship. And really the core purpose of this assignment is to introduce you to the idea of an array. So there's A-R-R-A-Y, array, which is basically just a list of information that we can store in a single variable. Now, before we dive into what an array is, let's talk about why we need one in the first place for what we're trying to do. So far, I have the ship shooter code in front of us, and this is the copy of the code that is currently posted in the class. So if you're not at this point, you can grab that code right from the class. It's in module 11 here at the ship shooter with test laser. So that will get you right here. Most of you, I think, are here already. So right now, we kind of put our laser engineering hats on, and we designed this laser class that has a simple constructor, which just has the position of the laser that we're going to create, and two methods to draw the laser and to move the laser. Now, with this small blueprint in place, we can go ahead and create a single laser. So you can see at the top here, we declared this global variable, and then down in our P5JS functions, we went and we created a single laser, one laser at this position, 200, 400. And then down in our draw function, we went and we called the move and the draw function in each frame. So if we run this program, you'll see that we have one laser just get created or spawn right here at the bottom of the screen, and then just fly right off the screen. And we have to reset the program every time to get that to go. Now, what we want to do now is we want to get this bad boy attached to the ship. Because right now we can see that the laser is functioning the way we want, and it looks the way we want right now. We'll go ahead and make it pretty a little bit later, but now we want to complete the functionality of getting it onto our ship. So our ship, we can fly around with our ship, but we can't shoot, and there's no way to recreate a laser. So the idea here is that every time we hit a certain key, we want to fire a laser. Now, you can think of this like spawning in a video game, right? When you die in a game, you spawn at a spawn point, right? Your character comes back. Or when you shoot, every time you hit the shoot button, a new kind of projectile comes out of whatever you're shooting. The point is that we're creating something new in the system based on a user's action, right? And when I say something new, I'm quite literally saying this is happening every time you're hitting a button. You're saying new something. In this case, we're calling it laser. So every time we hit a key, we're creating a new laser. Now, in order for us to be able to move and draw every laser that we create in our system, we need to be able to actually account for or keep track of every laser we create. So think about it. If we had 400 lasers on the screen, we wouldn't want to have to do this 400 times. And really, it wouldn't be possible for us to keep the program dynamic and interactive to hard code all of these lasers. It just wouldn't make sense because the user has no control over this. So we want to dynamically create new lasers every time the user hits a key. And we need to account for and keep track of all of those lasers. And this is where an array comes in. I think maybe another way to illustrate what an array is to maybe look at a program like Google Sheets, or maybe even something like Excel, right? So if we go to, oh, I'm not signed in here. Hold on here. There we go. So if we go into a spreadsheet, right? Some of you may have used a spreadsheet before, which is basically just a table of information, right? Businesses use spreadsheets for pretty much everything. So if you haven't experienced what a spreadsheet is, I guarantee you will sometime in your professional career. So a spreadsheet allows us to basically just enter information. So we could do things like, hey, I want to keep track of lasers. So we could say, give it a title here, laser, and then maybe laser name. And maybe even we have like laser position, which is what the X is, right? X and Y coordinate. So we could say we have laser 1 name, and the position will be 10, 10. Now, what we could do is we can create a bunch of lasers here. So if you scroll this down, we can have a bunch of lasers. Now, this table is keeping track of all of the lasers that we just created, right? It's just a simple table. Now, we need to create this exact same kind of flow in our software so that we can go back and say, hey, I need to go and loop over every single one of these lasers and call the draw and move methods on each one of these instances of lasers. Think about it too, like the dog example we did in class, right? If we had a whole dog park enabled in our software and we wanted to go around and make all of the dogs bark in our system, we can store all the dogs in an array, a list, and then just simply loop over them and call each method inside of them. So let me take it back into code real quick and give you a super simple example. Before we go into the laser, I'm going to go ahead and create a new sheet. And you don't have to follow along with this piece. Just flow with me on this. So if we wanted to create a regular variable, say for example, I wanted to create a variable called my name, right? And we could put in my name, just my name, Nick, right? And we could also maybe have a variable, your name. Your name, maybe we'll put John, right? And we can keep going with this and add more and more names and have a whole list of names. Another way we can do this is store all of the names in a single variable called names. So instead of taking this approach, and we'll add one more just for illustrative purposes, I'll say another name equals Steve. Good old Steve, right? So now we have 3 names in our system. Now, this is pretty inefficient, and it's not easy to develop a loop to loop over all of these values. Think about it. If we wanted to write something like a for loop, if we were to say for, var I equals 0, and then I is less than, what do we put here? We don't really know, because I guess if we know there's 3 names, we could say less than 3, right? And then we can loop over this, but then what do we put here? Because now we have to declare each one of these names. So we could use conditionals, right? We could say, hey, if I equals 0, then we'll print my name, right? But then we'd have to do this for every single position. We'd have to say, if it's 1, then use your name. And if it's 2, then use another name, right? This is really sloppy. It's not maintainable. It's horrible, right? You're gonna rip your hair out trying to actually flow with this. This is not the way we would do it. So instead of doing it this way, what we could do is we can declare a single variable called names. And now if we say names is equal to a little bit of syntax here. So we've got these brackets. These brackets tell us that, hey, we're creating an array. And inside this array, we could put all 3 names. So we could put Nick, we could put John, and we could put Steve. Now, this variable contains all of the names in a list, in a simple list, just like our spreadsheet here is a list like this, right? So now, let me get out of this. Now with the information in a list, we can simply loop over all of the values inside of this array. So we would need a way for us to actually access the information inside of this array. You can think of an array like a collection of boxes, right? And now we have the ability to look at one box at a time. So if we wanted to look at, say, Nick, we would say something like this, names sub. So we would put the brackets in there and we'd say sub, an index value. So the index value here, it starts at 0. So name sub 0, like the Mortal Kombat character, is going to be Nick. Names sub 1 is going to be John, and etc. So name sub 2 is going to be Steve. So this is how we would access the information inside of this array. Now this is really important because it gives us the capability to dynamically loop over all of the values using using a looping structure. So we could go back to that same loop we did before, and we could say, hey, as long as I is less than names dot length, which is a property of the array, then I plus plus. And now in here, we can use the looping variable. We can use the looping variable I to be able to index values inside of the array dynamically. So we could say names sub I. And now if we did this, we console log this out, we would actually see, and I don't think I can run this here. Maybe I can run this here. It might let me run it here. No, because I'm not in a P5 function. So if I go here and put this, say, in the setup, we could do this. No, it's not letting me do this. Oh, because it's not name, it's names. So there you go. So now we would see all the names on the console here, right? Because we're looping over all the values. Now, I just went through that pretty quickly, right? The key point here is that an array allows us to store multiple values, or really multiple variables, inside of a single variable. This is important for what we're trying to do with our laser, because we want to dynamically spawn new lasers, and most importantly, keep track of those lasers throughout the running of the game, right? So that we can update and draw every single one of them, right? So let's see what that would look like inside of our program. Just taking a sip of my coffee. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to open up the ship shooter. I'm not going to save this piece. I'm going to open up the ship shooter. And now, in order for us to bolt on a laser gun to our ship, I'm going to go a little bit slower on this part. So in order for us to bolt on a laser gun on our ship, we need to add a new property to our ship. That property is going to be the array of lasers that the ship produces. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to create a new property in the constructor. So I'm going to go right here, make sure you're inside of this constructor, right? So you're inside the curly brackets of the constructor of the ship. And now I'm going to say this dot, and we're going to say lasers equals open and close bracket. Now, that right there is going to bolt on the laser gun. Right now, we have a spot in memory that we can store lasers. It's empty and it doesn't do anything yet, but it's there, and we're able to now utilize it in other areas of our system. So what do we do now? So now we need to give the ship the ability to actually fire. So we now need to give the ship a new behavior. So the first thing we needed was a property. And the second thing we need is a behavior, or a new piece of functionality to be able to actually fire a laser. So when we talk about a new piece of functionality or a new behavior, we're not talking about properties. We're talking about what? We're talking about these bad boys, right? What are these? These, the draw and the move. We're talking about methods, right? So we need to add a new method outside of the constructor here, and we're going to call it fire. Now again, we're making up the names of these things. We're creatively coding, right? We could call this anything we want. We could call it shoot, whatever. I'm calling it fire just because it's descriptive of what we're trying to do. So now we have this fire method. Now inside the fire method, what do we want to do? What should happen inside the fire method? And don't overthink this, right? What should happen here is that we need to create a new laser. We need to spawn a laser, right? We need to spawn a laser. Now, how do we spawn a laser? So we know how to spawn a laser already, because we know how to use the new operator, as we did down here inside of our little testing phase here, where we were testing the laser like this. So we're going to do the same exact thing, but the difference is, instead of storing it in a single variable, we're going to put it on the end of an array, a growing list of lasers. So to do that, there's a little bit of syntax here. So I'll just type this out and then explain it. We're going to say this dot, and you know what? Maybe I'll call, instead of calling this lasers, maybe I'll call this laser gun, right? Because the laser gun is a little more descriptive. So we'll call this array a laser gun. And then we're going to say this dot laser gun. And I'm going to say dot push. Now what this is arrays in and of themselves are in fact an object. Just like the ship is an object, just like the laser is an object, the array itself is an object which has methods on it. And one of the methods is called push. And what this method does for us is it basically just pushes a new value or puts a new value on the end of the array. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to say push. And now inside of the push method call, we're going to go ahead and add a new laser. So we're going to say new laser, open and close parentheses. And now we need to give that new laser a position. Now remember, we're inside of the ship right now. And when we spawn a new laser, we don't want it to spawn where our test laser is right down here. It should naturally spawn at least somewhere near the ship, ideally at the edge right here, right? So how can do we have the information inside of this instance of a ship that records the position of the ship? We do, right? It's in the this.x and this.y properties. So what we could do here is, I'm going to move this over just a little bit, is we're going to say spawn a new laser at this.x, comma, this.y. Now what this is going to do is anytime the fire method is called, the laser gun is going to get a new laser spawned onto it. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and just console.log this.laser gun. So we could see the actual values inside of the laser gun get outputted onto our console. So it'll give us a little bit more of a visualization as to what's happening in the computer's memory. So now, is this actually doing anything yet? Can we use this? We're not there yet, right? We only just developed the functionality, but we're not using it yet. We need to actually call this method when a certain action happens in our system. And where could we do that? So right now we have this, and we're kind of free to figure this out, right? Like there's a bunch of different ways we could do this, but right now the move method is doing a bunch of key checks. And if we go down even further, I think every frame we're calling move on the ship, right? We're calling move. So every frame we're checking what key is down and if it should move or not. We could, this is probably the easiest way to do it, is extend the move functionality to also detect if we're trying to shoot. So the same thing we're doing here, if key is down, manipulate the actual X or Y coordinates. After the last conditional inside of this move, we can now check to say, hey, if key is down, say, what key do we want to check? Let's take a quick look at keycode.info. I'm going to say, I think space. So 32. So if I hit the space bar, I want to shoot. So if we go back to our code and I say 32, then what we're going to do here is we're going to call our fire method, right? So I'm going to say this.fire. Now, awesome. Now let's see if we did it right or if there's any issues. I'm going to move this guy here and I'm going to hit the space bar. But now look at that. By just tapping the space bar, because it was down for a period of time, we generated one laser, then we generated two lasers, Then we generated 3 lasers, and we generated ultimately 4 lasers. So now that list has 4 lasers in it, 0, 1, 2, and 3. This looks a lot like the spreadsheet we were just looking at, doesn't it? So now we have in the computer's memory a list of lasers that the user created by hitting the space bar. Now visually over here, you don't actually see anything yet. Nothing's happening. But we have the lasers. So we can now use this information to actually draw it to the screen and show the user that, hey, you did something. So where do we do this? This is really the last part of this, is now in our draw method of the ship, right? We're doing pretty much all of the work in the ship right now. In the draw method of the ship, we now not only want to draw the ship, which we're doing here, we want to also draw all of the lasers the ship has fired. Now, how can we do that? How can we draw and ultimately draw and move all of the lasers that the ship has fired? What tools do we have at our disposal to loop over all of the lasers and be able to call the methods on them? It's going to be a loop, right? So what we could do is we could say for, let's use our for loop. I'm going to say for var I is equal to, all right. We don't have to complain there. I'm going to turn this auto refresh off for a second. And I'm going to say, let's loop as long as I is less than this dot laser gun dot length. Now length is a property of the actual array object, just like we had our push method that returns the length of the actual array. So we can dynamically determine how many lasers are in the system. This is super powerful stuff, guys. This is used like crazy. So we're now taking a list and we're looping over that list, and we're looking at every single item in that list. So I'm going to go ahead and open and close the curlies in the loop. Now all we have to do here is, being that we're looping over every laser, we have to index and touch every single laser we created. So we're going to say this dot laser gun sub I, because we're going to use that I variable to dynamically index it. So the first time we loop, it's going to be 0. The second time it's going to be 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, all the way up to whatever value this dot laser gun dot length is. So if we put I in here, now we want to actually use the laser because we're now looking at one single laser. So we're going to say dot move, and then we're going to do the same exact thing, but we're also going to call the dot draw on the laser. So now for every single laser, we're moving it and we're drawing it. So let's try to run this and see what happens. Now I'm going to move this bad boy and I'm going to hit the space bar. Boom! Boom! Now we are shooting. I can hold it down and just go to town. We are shooting. Now we're not shooting exactly where we like. I mean, maybe we can move this over a little bit and move it up. See how it's coming from the bottom of our ship? I kind of want it to come from the tip of the ship up here. So maybe I'll go where we're spawning our lasers here, this dot X, this dot Y. Maybe I'll put a little offset on this Y and see if that changes it. That didn't really do much, huh? Oh, I don't have auto refresh on. Let me put auto refresh back on. Oh, that went in the wrong direction. Let me go ahead and do a subtraction there instead of addition. And all right, there we go. That's a little better. Maybe not 50. Now I'm just playing, right? So now we're going to go ahead and say 40. That's a little better, but maybe we want to move this X over slightly, maybe -5. A little bit too much. Maybe -3. And there we go. We have our laser. Now the important aspect of this is if we look at our console, look at that. We have 60 lasers in the system right now. So every time we hit the space bar, we are going to spawn a new laser, and we're going to, in the draw method, we're looping over every single laser and we're drawing it and moving it, which gives us the capability to have this kind of, look at that, we still have more lasers going. Now there's a couple of you know, things that are not great with this. Like for example, right now, even though you don't see any lasers, there are still 113 lasers out there. They're all the way in deep space. They're not on the screen, but they are in the computer's memory, and we are still looping over them. So there's some optimizations that we want to make sure that, hey, when we don't need a laser anymore, we take it off this list so that this list doesn't continuously grow out of bounds and just becomes really large. Because if this loop becomes really, really large, the system performance is going to start to really slow down, and the computer's memory will be filled, and it'll crash your computer. So there is some optimizations we can do here, but for now, we don't have to worry about it. We have a working laser gun. Now, the last thing I want to do before we end up is that we don't need to actually have our laser testing harness anymore. So we could take out this test laser, and we could take out the new laser that we have here. We don't need this bad boy anymore, and we don't need these lines of code either. We don't need laser.move and laser.draw, because now all of the laser functionality is encapsulated inside of this ship object, and we're using just one ship object, and that bad boy knows how to fire a laser. All right, guys, we will go over this in depth in the coming week, so don't get too crazy if you're like, what the heck just happened? I wanted to record this because I want you to be able to pause, rewind, and really kind of let this sink in and think about it a bit. I also did post a couple of little interesting visualizations here. This is one of them. I found this is kind of cool. A way to visualize arrays. This starts with some multi-dimensional arrays, which is something we're not doing right now. So you can take this out and just put a basic array in here and say, put like a couple of numbers in here, right? Just like this in the array format using your brackets, and then hit run. And you can see that this is essentially what's happening in the computer. Is you've got this index 0, 1, 2, and 3, and then inside these boxes, in these little memory locations, you have some values. And that's essentially what it looks like. I wonder if I put strings in here. If I do this, say I did what we did in the example. If I say Nick, John, and Steve, and we run it, there you go. So you can kind of visualize these boxes and how in a kind of 3D cool environment. So I did link this in the course as well. So play along with this, try to get this into your environment, get it working with a laser. If you blow right through this and you're like, I got this, you could try to drop images into your laser or your ship and try to get it looking the way you want it. But yeah, let me know if you have any questions. I'm available for anybody for some office hours if you'd like to schedule some time. And we'll be diving more into this in the coming week. All right. Good job, guys. Thanks.